We're back on Yes, by the way, which is good. They were having some syncing problems for the first hour, but now you heard the audio, but now you get to see how great we look on this Friday afternoon. So welcome to all of our viewers on Yes, and for all that have been listening on 880 ESPN. Now we get a chance to talk to our good friend, our colleague, Buster Olney, and he joins us now. Buster, it's Michael, Don, and Peter. How you doing?
What's up, guys? How you doing?
We're doing great, but we need you to tell us what's going on with Juan Soto. Where's it going to end up? We need you to tell us now.
There you go.
Now that is a high bar.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. But I'll try to give you the parameters of where it stands. As you know, he's been in these meetings with teams. And aside, I can't wait for the first time any of these meetings is cast as anything but good. Right.
It's like surgery, right?
Yeah,
it's like
successful surgery.
Exactly. A successful. That's exactly right. I still think he's got more conversations to have with the Philadelphia Phillies as part of this process. And then, from what I understand, sometime probably before Thanksgiving is when the numbers start to get thrown around. And to this point, it's really just been conversations. Juan getting to know people in each of these organizations. Him having a chance to learn something about them doing some presentation. But, I mean, let's face it, we've all thought in the end that there's a good chance he's going to take the highest number that's put in front of him, and we're going to find out, or at least, the Scott Boras will find out, beginning of next week, exactly where those numbers are going to fall. I think at the moment, and I remember talking to you guys back in August saying I thought that the Yankees, if they were going to get him, they were going to have Soto pick them over a higher offer from another team. I still think that's going to come from the Mets. The Blue Jays are obviously very serious coming in because they got a ton of payroll flexibility with Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. set for free agency after next fall, a bunch of other contracts coming off the books. I think they're going to be the closest team that we see to a blank check outside of New York. Mm-hmm. The Phillies, I do think that I would take them seriously. I don't think the Dodgers are as serious as some other teams. And, why would they be? They've got so many great players anyway. But I think it's going to start heating up next week.
Now, we look at paying someone through the logic of, like, how rich is that team based on how much money they generate. But we know Steve Cohen is sitting on $20 billion. So it doesn't matter how much the Mets make. It's really how much he's willing to spend out of his own money to make this work. Are there any other owners? Does Rogers have that same appetite with Toronto? Does Philly ownership have that same appetite that Steve Cohen, we assume, has by going to his pile of money and going beyond what the Mets actually make?
So I think, and the fact that the Blue Jays, basically were willing to give Shohei Ohtani the deal that he got from the Dodgers tells you they've got that money. And I mentioned, and they have, beyond 2025, almost a blank slate of payroll. Like, they have very few obligations, after next year. So they absolutely could be the team that, puts up a crazy number. John Middleton, as you guys know, the Phillies owner, has come out and said things along the lines that we heard from, the late, great Mike Ilitch and the late, great Peter Seidler, that he doesn't really, he's not worried about the bottom line. He's trying to build a winner. He obviously has done deal making with Scott Boras before with Bryce Harper. The fact that Soto knows Bryce, that gives him another, Superman to Batman situation like he has with the Yankees. So I do think they're going to be teams that maybe, could make an offer larger than what the Yankees have. And it really comes down, and I think Soto has done a great job, just as Judge did 2 years ago, in really hiding what he thinks. And maybe he doesn't even know what he really thinks until he gets down to it and the numbers are actually right in front of him. What happened with Judge, as you guys remember, is that when he was coming down to it and the Padres offered more than the Yankees, Judge looked at it all and said, you know what, I really want to play with the Yankees. And that was what, the Yankees had hoped all along. I don't know of anyone to this point who really knows what Juan Soto wants. Does he want to stay in a ballpark that's absolutely suited to him, playing alongside Judge? Does he want to be the man? Does he want to be the biggest, star in the team? And that's what he would have with Toronto. Does he want the biggest money? Maybe that's what he winds up getting with the Mets or the Phillies. We don't know exactly what Soto wants yet.
Do you believe the Baerga report? Because Carlos has been right about some stuff before. So he said the Mets have already floated 660 over 14 years. And frankly, I don't even know if that gets done. But do you believe there's any validity to that?
I believe everything you just said. And Carlos is very well connected. I would never say that his report wasn't right. He's gotten so many other numbers right. But I do think when we get to this time of year, somebody's offer could be another person's proposal, could be another person's thought.
Do you believe? Though, that in all of these meetings, Buster, that numbers were never discussed?
In these meetings that have gone on, I believe that.
Really?
I believe that in these particular meetings. Now, do I necessarily think that, there hasn't been an off-the-record conversation between Scott and an owner? Not off the record. A separate conversation between Scott and an owner where they talk about concepts and they talk about, proposals, that sort of thing. I would believe that that's going on, too, where there's some early indications. Because these are really successful people. Steve Cohen's an incredibly successful person. The idea that he's going to wait for a play to dictate the timing of it, it goes against my sense of logic. But, I do know that teams, the way they're casting it when you have conversation with clubs is that Scott is indicating he's not ready for offers yet.
Now, the other thing that's been speculated is just where at the seat of the table Juan would be with decision-making and the like. Are there teams that you know of that might have a line of demarcation when it came to giving that kind of power to a player?
And that's hard to say. I mean, Francisco Lindor, since he signed with the Mets, it's pretty well known among the staff there that he's got a really good relationship, he and his wife do, with the Cohens. In a different way, it's a different relationship than I think Aaron Judge has with Hal Steinbrenner. How much influence does that have? I don't know. I don't know precisely. Peter Seidler, the late owner of the Padres, had very personal relationship with the players. I think if Peter Seidler were still alive, Soto would have already signed with the Padres because Seidler's vision was to build that franchise around Soto and Manny Machado. And, one thing that I heard during this process is that, Seidler would have absolutely done everything he could to sign him, and he would have never traded him, for sure. I think that really varies, Don, and I don't mean to skirt your question, but I think it really varies from owner to owner. Which owner is willing to have a player, bypass the general manager. We know that happened with the Yankees with George Steinbrenner. As you guys remember, Billy Martin was jealous. And, Michael, you know this better than I do. Billy Martin at times was jealous of the relationship between Reggie and George. And those things would sort of shift and change, from year to year, even from day to day.
You know what is, I would push back a little bit on, the influence aspect, Buster, because what you said about Lindor and the Cohens is true. They're extraordinarily close. But when push comes to shove, you're just a player because Lindor, if I'm to believe the stuff that I've heard, absolutely adored Buck Showalter. And what did the Cohens do? They fired him. So, I mean, your influence only goes so far. The guy who owns the team and pays the bills is going to make the final decision. Even if it's Aaron Judge and Garrett Cole, they can make suggestions, but you really don't have power. Nobody's going to give that power to a player.
Correct. And on the other hand, one thing I would love to know the answer to, and I don't know, but, Lindor and Javi Baez, do the Mets make that trade for Javier Baez if not for Lindor's presence? Right. I don't know the answer to that. Right. But that's one of those things that happen. I mean, my God, watch LeBron and the Lakers.
And usually it doesn't work well. Now,
you just don't know.
Now, I have always thought in my head, not from anybody that said anything to me, that the per-year average annual value is going to fall between 46 and 50. Do you agree?
Yes, I do. I think, and you know Scott, I mean, Scott is about benchmarks. When Alex Rodriguez signed his contract, it was exact for $252 million with the Texas Rangers. It was exactly twice of what Kevin Garnett had gotten from the Timberwolves, and so Scott could say that his client got, twice as much as anybody else. I'm absolutely convinced, just because after watching Scott, work through the years, that the value somehow of this deal is going to be cast is anything over $700 million. And you can spread that out over 15 years or 14 years. There are a lot of ways to make that happen. You can work in deferred money, but I think two benchmarks are going to go down. One is the present-day value. The record now is Ohtani's deal at $461. I think he's going to surpass that. And I think, through the deferred money and structure, that sort of thing, I think he's going to get past 701.
At or during the winter meetings is still your timeline, Buster?
I think we're going to find out. My guess is just before, and there'll be a press conference at the winter meetings. And that's purely a guess, because I know this. Scott has a lot of other guys who are going to be affected by Soto's situation, right? They're players who are going to become the focus of teams that don't sign Soto. They're going to be consolation prizes that Scott needs to dole out. And we saw what happened last winter when, Scott had a lot of clients sort of drag out. I don't think it's going to be that way this winter.
You literally, Buster, took my next question. Was last winter sort of a learning season for Scott?
Look, short answer, I'd say no. I think Scott's going to do his business the way he believes it should be done. He's going to give you his reasons for why he thinks last winter played out. I think he's had so many more successes than failures. I think last winter was, for some of those guys, a real failure. But I don't think Scott is going to deviate. But I just think the practical reality is, you guys remember the winter when Carlos Beltran was a free agent leaving the Astros, and everybody waited. From what I heard, Beltran in his heart really wanted to sign with the Yankees. He signs in early January with the Mets, and the Astros are left holding the bag, right? They don't have the player. And I think a lot of teams watch that, and they don't want to be in the same position. So I think Scott is going to understand that some of these potential landing spots for his many other clients are going to be affected by how long this drags out. And look, in a situation like Soto, you've got everything you want. You got the two biggest teams in baseball, in the biggest, in the media capital of the world, going for him, apparently, with very aggressively. And beyond that, do you really need more information? Do you need to drag it out to January? I think he needs to get it done so we can get teams more focused on Pete Alonso and Corbin Burns and some of his other guys.
And, the sidebar on this is it probably behooves Pete Alonso if Soto doesn't go to the Mets. Because I think if Soto doesn't go to the Mets, then Alonso
totally
is in play.
That. Yeah, and I'd say this. Like, I've seen speculation that, if the Yankees don't sign Soto, they'll turn to Alonso. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it.
Me neither.
I'm not buying that a team that, already has Giancarlo Stanton for a couple more years at DH. You have an Aaron Judge who at some point, as he begins to slow down, he's going to have to change position, use DH more. They're going to sign on for 6 years of Pete Alonso. I don't buy it. And Michael, you remember that in recent years, those years in which the Yankees were stacked with right-handed hitters. I don't think Brian Cashman's going to create that again.
If you look at the last time the Yankees lost a free agent, I don't even know if lost is the right word because I'm not sure that they were devastated when he left. That was Robbie Cano.
No.
And their plan B did not turn out well. The guys that got Ellsbury and McCann, it wasn't what they expected it to be. Do you have any inkling of what plan B would be this year if they don't get Soto?
So, and all I can go is on the history. I can't tell you what's being said in the room about, and because that they've got that planned out. Okay, where are our pivot points? I think you'd agree with me on this, that Brian Cashman's history is that he, in a pinch, he gravitates toward pitching. And I tell you what, there are some pretty good candidates for that. I think Max Fried is an excellent candidate. He's the closest thing that this generation has to Jimmy Key. A guy who would be very comfortable coming into New York. He's pitched in big games. That would be an interesting name for me. Corbin Burns, of course, former Cy Young Award winner. And I really believe this after watching the Yankees this year, and this is why I mentioned about Pete Alonso, and I just don't see them adding another sort of lumbering right-handed hitter. Willie Adames, to me, was an excellent fit. Not only because he's a good player, but because of the athletic versatility. He's had an excellent season last year. He can move to third base if you wanted to. You can move him to second base. His agents have signaled to the industry he's willing to go, and he is known as a great clubhouse guy, like off the charts. And so that to me is potentially a natural pivot point, not only because you want a guy who can help to fill in at least some of the offense that Soto would leave behind, but also because the versatility and the athleticism, I think they're going to need that as they go forward.
Buster, we've debated this on the show many times. You've got the NBA and the NHL have their July 1st free agent frenzy, where it seems like everybody's gobbled up in a 12 to 24-hour period. A lot of attention on the sport. Baseball does it a different way, where it could be all winter. We're waiting for these names to get signed. Which way do you think is best for a sport promoting itself?
I think it's much better if you had a period where you get baseball fans excited, where that they would have the focus. Can you imagine if at the winter meetings this year we went there with the general expectation that during that time that all of these big names would find landing spots? I mean, baseball would dominate the sports landscape for 4 days. But here's the thing. Major League Baseball and the Player Association aren't even close to being on the same page in coming up with a solution for that, and they just don't collaborate. So it's like wishing for world peace.
Yeah, and that's not going too well. So is there a part of you that thinks that if Cashman had his druthers, he would pass on Soto and get creative with the money that they would have spent on one person?
100%. And that is because I think Brian, especially with a lot of years in the books, I just don't think he's afraid of players saying no. Because they have, certainly there are a lot of general managers who would feel good that they could identify possible solutions if suddenly $600 to $700 million was freed up in obligation. And as you know, his history, time and time and time again, he's advised the team to walk away. When Alex Rodriguez opted out in 2007, he was the person in the front office saying, let him go. Don't chase him. When CC Sabathia's agent, Brian Peters, was threatening to opt out of his deal after 3 years and he had the torn shoulder capsule, Brian was like, you know what? Let him go. Don't worry about giving him an extension. Robinson Cano. I don't know exactly, what the number Brian was advising when Judge was a free agent, but I really believe that Brian was probably absolutely ready to walk away from that thing, and it was Hal Steinbrenner who made that deal happen. I think Brian's been around long enough, and he understands they're the Yankees, and even if they don't retain Soto, guess what? Yankee fans are going to stay with the team.
Good stuff, Buster. If we don't talk to you, I don't think we will next week unless something breaks. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
You too, guys. Always fun.
All right. There he is.
Buster.
The champ. We call him the champ. Buster Olney.
He just, and I'm not saying this because he's obviously not fat. I'm not suggesting that. He looks and feels like somebody that really enjoys a good Thanksgiving.
You think so?
Yeah, I just have a feeling that it's a big deal. I would be shocked if he's not at a table with at least 30 other people.
Well, he's also a farm boy, and that's a
maybe
big
that's
Thanksgiving
why.
thing. Yeah.
Like I just have this little house on the prairie feel about Buster's Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I think that Buster actually, all the stuff that's made, it's eggs that have been laid in his backyard, and the milk, he's milking the cows. He gets up at 4 in the morning every day for no reason.
It's a locally sourced Thanksgiving.
Yeah, farm to table.
That's what makes him the champ.
He's the champ. You couldn't be more right, Peter. He is.
That's how he's the champ.
Yeah.
It's why he's the champ.
Beautiful.
I honestly love that, man.